You know, there are some names in history that just echo, and Alexander the Great is definitely one of them. For more than 2,000 years, his story has been told and retold. He was this king, this conqueror, a military genius who, get this, never lost a single battle. And in just over a decade, he carved out one of the biggest empires the ancient world had ever laid eyes on. And you know that incredible ambition? It seems like it was planted right from the start. Just listen to this from his own father, King Philip. It's almost like a prophecy, isn't it? Like he looked at his own son and just knew that the world he was going to leave behind would never, ever be big enough. So, how does a young prince become the stuff of legend? Well, it all starts with an upbringing that was, let's just say, not exactly typical. It was an education designed to forge a conqueror right from the very beginning. This is one of those classic stories about him with his horse, Bucephalus. It really shows you what made him different. Everyone else saw this wild, untamable animal, but Alexander, he actually looked. He used what his famous tutor, the philosopher Aristotle, had taught him to observe. And he noticed something no one else did. The horse was terrified of its own shadow. So he just quietly turned the horse to face the sun, and boom, the shadow was gone. He saw what everyone else missed. And just think about who was in his head day in and day out. His personal tutor was Aristotle, literally one of the greatest minds in human history. But his heroes? They were guys like Achilles, the warrior from the Trojan War, the demigod Heracles, and Cyrus the Great, the guy who founded the very empire he would one day conquer. He supposedly slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow. He wasn't just trying to be a good king, he was trying to be better than the heroes and the gods themselves. So with a mind full of legends and a kingdom he already felt was too small, he looked east, towards the Persian Empire. And this was the ultimate David versus Goliath situation. You have Alexander's small, tough-as-nails Macedonian army going up against the massive, seemingly endless power of Persia. And this, right here, this is a perfect picture of his genius at work. At the Battle of Issus, the Persian king Darius had way more soldiers, a huge advantage. But Alexander completely outsmarted him. He basically tricked Darius's army into fighting on this narrow strip of land, where their giant numbers were useless. They were trapped, with nowhere to go. And this is where you really see the difference between them. Alexander was right there in the thick of it, leading the charge, shouting to his troops, "You have Alexander Darius." He was right there with them. Darius, on the other hand, he panicked. He listened to some bad advice, gave up a better position, and when things got tough, he just fled. He ran, leaving his army totally demoralized. But then, right after this brutal victory, you see this other side of him, a totally different side. He captures Darius's own family, his wife, his daughters, and instead of treating them like prisoners, he shows them this incredible kindness and respect. The historians tell us he believed that mastering himself was an even greater victory than conquering his enemies. It's a really complex picture. So he's just shattered the Persian army. He's the new king of Asia. You'd think he'd take a break, right? Nope, not Alexander. His ambition was just boundless. He pushed his army even further, past the edges of the known world, deep into the mysterious lands of India. And it was there that he faced maybe his toughest fight ever. He wasn't just up against another army of men with spears. This was King Porus and his war elephants. I mean, can you imagine? These Macedonians had never seen anything like it. It was a terrifying, brutal battle that really tested them to their absolute limit. After the battle, they bring the defeated King Porus to him, and Alexander asks him, "How do you want to be treated?" Porus's answer is just legendary. He looks him in the eye and says, "Treat me like a king." Alexander was so blown away by his courage that he gave him his kingdom back and then some. But even a man who thinks like a god has limits. And his limits, it turns out, were his own men. I mean, after a decade of nonstop fighting, after marching something like 20,000 miles, his soldiers, these incredibly loyal guys, finally just said, no more. They were done. And for the first time, Alexander had to turn back. His dream of reaching the end of the world was stopped, not by an enemy, but by his own exhausted army. He had conquered the entire known world. He never lost a battle. But when he got back to Babylon, the heart of his new empire, a different kind of enemy was waiting for him. And it was one he couldn't outsmart and he couldn't defeat. And the way it happened, it's just so strange. It started with a fever after a party, and over just 11 days, his body completely failed him. First, he couldn't walk, then he couldn't speak. But here's the really haunting part from the ancient accounts. His mind was still there. He was alert. On the second to last day, as his whole army filed past his bed, weeping, he couldn't speak or move, but he acknowledged every single one of them just by moving his eyes. For centuries, everyone has wondered, what was it? Poison? Malaria? Something else? Well, a modern diagnosis might just fit all of the bizarre pieces of the puzzle together. Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's this rare thing where your own immune system basically attacks your nerves, causing a paralysis that slowly moves up your body.
And what's so wild about this theory is just how perfectly all the details line up. I mean, check this out. He was a 32-year-old male. He died in what is now modern Iraq in early summer. All of those factors, age, sex, location, season, they perfectly match a specific variant of GBS known in that region. And the symptoms? A fever followed by a paralysis that moves up the body, all while the mind stays clear. It's an almost perfect match.
Okay, so this medical theory seems to explain how he died, but it also opens up one last, absolutely mind-blowing mystery that's been hiding in plain sight in the history books this whole time. You see, there's this detail in the old histories that everyone just kind of dismissed as a myth, a way to make him seem godlike. They claim that after he was declared dead, his body lay in the sweltering Babylonian heat for 6 days and showed no signs of decay, none. The GBS theory presents a much more chilling explanation for that. What if the reason his body didn't decay wasn't because he was a god, but because he wasn't actually dead yet? Here's the horrifying possibility. GBS can cause a paralysis so total, so complete, that your breathing slows down to almost nothing. Your pupils become fixed. In the ancient world, those were the signs of death. The condition is called pseudo-thanatos, a false diagnosis of death. It's entirely possible that Alexander was still alive, conscious, but trapped inside a body that couldn't move when everyone thought he was gone. The miracle of his body not decaying? It was just, he hadn't died yet. So, in the end, we might never know the final bizarre truth of his death. But what we do know, without a doubt, is the legacy he left behind. The man may have died, but in his wake, he created a completely new world. He smashed together East and West, spreading Greek ideas and culture across this enormous area. And that fusion, the Hellenistic world, would shape the course of history for centuries. He was gone, but the world he made lived on.